The bagana, which is an instrument that has been used in the church for a very long time, was an instrument that was originally used by Saint David, or Qudus Dawit, as a way to connect his prayers to God. And he used this bagana with what we call the Psalms of David, or Mezmur Dawit, in the Bible. And so his prayers were often connected to God because of this bagana and because of the sounds that this bagana makes in connecting with your heart and with God. So not only this instrument, but a lot of instruments, or all of the instruments of the Orthodox Tewahedo Church, have a very symbolic meaning. So every movement, every design, the way it's constructed is very symbolic and carries a lot of spiritual weight to it. So these pillars on the side represent Saint Michael and Saint Gabriel, as well as the Old Testament and the New Testament. And there are 10 altares on here, or 10 strings, which are made of animal hide, but they represent the 10 commandments in the Old Testament. If we go to the bottom of the bagana, this satin represents Saint Mary's mahzan, or her womb, which with she carried the Godhead without being burned by the fire of God. The top of the bagana, which connects these two kind of pillars, or these two stands at the side, is a representation of God because of its width and its vastness.
This is called the tzanatzil. It represents everything in this has a representation to it. And the two that are on the left and the right, they represent the Old Testament and the New Testament. And this itself, it's a representation of the ladder that Jacob saw in his dream going up into the heavens from the bottom down to earth. So the leaves inside in here, they represent the angels that were going up and down the ladders.
And this is an instrument that's commonly used not only in werebs with our fathers, but also during Mahrez, which is actually how Qudus Yared praised God.
Mekomia.
Yep. So this in itself has many different meanings. During Mahalit, when the priests stand for Zimami, they usually start by raising it up and bringing it down to earth. So it's a representation that God, the Son, has come down from the heavens down to earth, and they take it to the left and to the right, and they just kind of swirl it around, and that represents that how while he was on earth, he went all around teaching, and he went from Hannah to Kayafa to before his crucifixion, and then after they do that, they finally just point it down to the ground. And when they do that, it's a representation. The God that does not die, he does not die in his character, has died for the sake of our sin. And then finally they raise it up very high, which represents his resurrection. Yep. And they bring it back slower, which also represents that the second coming of Christ for judgment. So that's all during Mahalit, during the Zimami portion.
Okay, so the kabbalah itself is, in its entirety, without even specifically discussing the small portions, the small finite details of the kabbalah, it's in and of itself a representation of Jesus Christ. And we see this actually in Abizom, which is what we're in right now, the Great Fast. We don't use the kabbalah because in Amharic we say tamwad, or it's sick, or it's hurt, and we don't use it because Jesus Christ during this time is fasting. He's suffering for us without food, without water, so we don't use this kabbalah as a way to show his suffering. So specifically though, the kabbalah has a small side and a big side. The small side, in Amharic we say Bajr Kumat Batababdarat, but that basically means that Jesus Christ, who is God, came down in the form of man. It's like something that can't even be defined, can't even be contained, came down in a human form, something that's not possible. And he was born of the Virgin Mary. He was a God. God was born of human. And so that this small side represents that mystery. And then this large side represents that even after he was born of human, God before and after his birth was always God. And his vastness, his glory cannot be contained, cannot be defined, cannot even be explained by words. So yeah, that's why this side is so large. And that greater mystery is even represented by hitting both of these sides. So with this red cloth under the animal hide, it's usually red. It can be different colors, but most often it's red because it has several meanings. One being that when Jesus Christ was born, this is a representation of the cloth that he was wrapped in. Another being when he was being hit, or he was being whipped by the soldiers, and to mock him, as the king of the Jews, that they were saying, the soldiers, they put a fine red cloth on him to mock his suffering. And the last meaning behind this red cloth is when he died. So Joseph and Nicodemus were wrapping him. They wrapped him, or they in this red cloth, and before he was buried. So those are the meanings of this cloth. This hide that we see going across this kabaro in different designs is a representation of the whip that the soldiers used to beat Jesus when he suffered for us. Whip marks were on Jesus Christ's back as a visual representation of his suffering for us. This was how you hold the kabaro. I think it's flipped, so it should be this way. But when you put the kabaro on, you put this around your neck, and this is a symbol of when they tied Jesus up, and they would pull him from left to right, from right to left, and yeah, so that's what this is symbolic of. When the kabaro is on the ground, it represents when Jesus Christ fell when he was carrying the cross. And when we pick it up, it represents how every time he fell, he would get back up. And when we put it back down, it represents how he fell again. When we hit it during Wadab, for example, we hit it very slowly. And that, the way we hit the kabaro, again, because Jesus Christ, in essence, is this kabaro, when we hit the kabaro slowly, it represents how the soldiers beat Jesus slowly. And then when we hit it faster, it represents how at different times they hit him very fast. And so, yeah, the way we even play the kabaro has a very important significance. My name is Kalila.
My name is Yam Sarach.